I'm 32, and I thought I had my life pretty figured out. I've been working steadily, have my own apartment, and I've always been close to my younger brother, Mark, who's 29. Growing up, we were inseparable. He was the goofy one, I was the responsible one, and even as adults, we kept that bond strong, or so I thought. The person I confided in the most, outside of family, was my best friend, Claire. We met in college and went through everything together. Bad breakups, moving apartments, failed jobs, all of it. She was practically a sister to me. She came to every family event, holidays, birthdays. Even my mom started referring to her as the second daughter. That's why what happened still feels like a punch to the gut. A couple of weeks ago, out of nowhere, I found out that Mark and Claire weren't just dating. They were married, and they'd been hiding it for over a year. The way I found out was humiliating too. Not from them, not even from a family member. I was scrolling on Instagram late at night, and there it was. A picture of Claire holding a baby, captioned, "Welcome to the world, sweet. Our little family is complete." She tagged Mark, and his last name was in her profile. I just sat there staring at my screen, my chest tightening. Complete? What family? What little boy? Nobody told me they were even together, let alone married with a child. I thought I was hallucinating at first, like maybe it was some weird inside joke I didn't understand. But no, it was real. And the worst part? My entire family knew. Everyone, my parents, cousins, even our aunt who lives in another state. They all knew about Mark and Claire being together, about their secret wedding, about the baby on the way. Everyone but me. I don't think I've ever felt so betrayed in my life. After I saw that post, I couldn't sleep. I kept rereading it, zooming in on the photo of her smiling down at this tiny baby, Mark's hand resting on her shoulder like they were some picture-perfect couple. I felt sick. My best friend, my brother, and a child I didn't even know existed. The next morning I called my mom, shaking with rage. She picked up cheerful, asking if I'd seen the news. I nearly dropped the phone. The news? Like this was some casual announcement? Like I should be excited? I demanded to know how long she'd known, and that's when it hit me harder than anything. She admitted she'd been keeping the secret for over a year because they didn't want drama. I couldn't even respond. Drama? Was I the drama? I was their sister. Claire was supposed to be my person. All those nights I cried to her about failed relationships, about not knowing if I'd ever find the right person. She already had my brother in her bed, and the excuses were pathetic. My mom said they didn't want to tell me until it was serious. Then, when it became serious, they didn't want to tell me because I might feel left out. And then, when Claire got pregnant, they decided it would be too stressful for me to find out while she was expecting. So instead of ever facing me like adults, they all silently agreed I should be the last to know. I hung up on my mom, shaking. My hands were sweaty, my heart pounding. I didn't know who I was angrier at. Mark for sneaking behind my back, Claire for betraying me, or my parents for enabling the lie. By that evening, my phone was lighting up with texts from Mark. He said they hadn't wanted to hurt me, that the relationship just happened, that it wasn't planned. He begged me to understand, and then the kicker, he asked if I'd come over to meet the baby, as if we could just skip past all of this and I'd step right into the role of doting aunt like nothing had happened. I didn't respond, but the anger in my chest was starting to morph into something else, a heavy ache, a hollow feeling that maybe, just maybe, I wasn't as important to anyone in my family as I thought I was. I lasted 2 days before I caved. Curiosity, anger, heartbreak, it all mixed together until I couldn't take it anymore. I texted Mark and told him I'd come over. I wasn't going for the baby. I wasn't going for family bonding. I was going because I needed answers, and I needed to see the look on their faces when I demanded them. When I pulled up to their house, my stomach flipped. I hadn't even known they'd bought a place together. My best friend, my supposed sister, had built a whole life with my brother while I was completely in the dark. The front yard even had one of those cheesy little home sweet home signs staked in the ground. I wanted to rip it out. Mark answered the door. He looked tired, but not ashamed. He smiled, like everything was fine, like I was just a guest coming by to admire the baby. That smile made me want to scream. And then Claire appeared. She was holding the baby, looking at me with wide eyes. For a second, she almost seemed relieved, like my showing up was her chance to patch things up. She said my name softly, like we were still best friends, like she hadn't destroyed that bond completely. But all I could see was betrayal. Every coffee date we had where she never once slipped, every phone call where she asked about my love life, but never hinted at hers. My throat burned as I watched her rock the baby. My nephew, apparently, and I realized this was my first time even seeing him. We sat down in their living room, and the silence was unbearable. The baby fussed a little, Claire bounced him, and Mark cleared his throat. Then, in the most casual tone, he said he hoped we could move forward, because family was too important to throw away over a mistake. A mistake. That word nearly broke me. I told them both exactly what I thought, that this wasn't a mistake. A mistake is forgetting someone's birthday, or losing a receipt. This was deliberate. This was two people I trusted the most, building an entire life behind my back. Claire tried to explain. She said she never planned to fall for Mark, that it just happened, and once it started, they didn't know how to tell me without ruining our friendship. She insisted she'd wanted to say something so many times, but Mark convinced her it was better for me if they kept it quiet until the right moment. The right moment. Apparently, that meant after the wedding, after the pregnancy, after the birth, after everything that mattered. I sat there numb, staring at the baby's tiny hands, my nephew, my blood, and yet I felt like an outsider in the room, like a stranger. Before I left, Mark asked me if I'd consider babysitting when things calmed down, like that was even on the table. I didn't answer. I just walked out, holding back tears until I got into my car. That night, I cried harder than I have in years, because for the first time in my life I realized I wasn't just angry, I was grieving the friendship I lost, the trust I'd never get back, and maybe even the family I thought I had. 2 days after that awful visit, my mom showed up at my apartment uninvited. She had a grocery bag and that tight, determined expression on her face that always meant she was about to lecture me. She started unpacking food on my counter like nothing was wrong, asking if I'd eat, if I was sleeping, all the motherly things. I just stood there, arms crossed, waiting for her to get to the real reason she came, and of course it didn't take long. She started in about how I needed to let go of the anger and forgive Mark and Claire because life was too short. She even had the nerve to say that one day I'd look back and laugh at how dramatic I was being. Laugh! I wanted to scream, but she didn't stop there. She brought up the baby, my nephew. She said he didn't deserve to grow up in a family divided, that it would be cruel to hold a grudge and miss out on his milestones. She painted this picture of me rocking him to sleep, of him running into my arms one day, calling me his favorite aunt. It was manipulative, and she knew it. I told her straight. I couldn't just erase what they'd done, that this wasn't about the baby, it was about betrayal. I told her how humiliated I felt, knowing everyone else had been in on the secret while I was kept in the dark like a fool. And then she dropped a bomb I wasn't expecting. She admitted that Claire had begged her not to tell me, that Claire, my supposed best friend, specifically asked my own mother to keep me out of the loop until after the wedding. My mom said she didn't like it, but she respected their wishes because it wasn't her place to interfere. So basically, the one person I thought might have had my back didn't. By the time she left, I was shaking with rage all over again. I felt like the black sheep of my own family. My brother had stolen my best friend. My best friend had lied to my face for over a year, and my parents had quietly gone along with it all. They wanted me to babysit, to play auntie like nothing. But the guilt was already creeping in. Not for Mark or Claire. For that baby. He didn't choose any of this, and the thought of cutting him out hurt in a way I couldn't shake. That night, lying in bed, I realized I was being forced into a choice I didn't want to make. Cut off my brother and my best friend forever, or swallow my pride, be part of a family that didn't even respect me enough to tell me the truth. Neither option. I didn't expect to hear from Claire so soon, but the very next evening I got a text from her asking if we could meet for coffee, just her. Against my better judgment, I think part of me still wanted to see if there was even a shred of the friend I used to know. We met at a little cafe downtown, the same place we'd spent countless hours during college cramming for exams and venting about relationships. Sitting across from her now, though, it didn't feel nostalgic. It felt foreign. She started off with small talk, asking about work, about my apartment, like she could somehow ease into the conversation. I cut her off. I told her to get to the point. That's when she launched into what I guess she thought was an apology. She admitted she handled things badly, that she should have told me sooner, that she hated keeping such a huge secret. But the way she said it felt rehearsed, like she was reading lines from a script. And then came the part that made my blood run cold. She said, "You have to understand, I didn't choose to fall in love with Mark. It just happened. And once it did, I couldn't imagine walking away from it." I just stared at her. This was supposed to make me feel better? To justify why she snuck around behind my back for months, and then asked my entire family to lie to me too? She went on, telling me how hard it was for her, how guilty she felt every time she hung out with me while dating my brother in secret. She even had the audacity to say she sacrificed a lot to protect our friendship. Sacrificed? She married my brother and had his child. What exactly had she sacrificed? I told her flat out that what hurt me most wasn't even the relationship itself. It was the betrayal. If she'd come to me in the beginning, told me she had feelings for Mark, it would have stung, sure. But at least she would have been honest. Instead, she let me confide in her while she built a whole life with my brother in silence. She got teary-eyed, and for a moment I almost softened. Almost. But then she reached across the table, touched my hand, and said she hoped I could move past this because the baby needs his aunt. There it was again, the baby car. Every single one of them was dangling that child in front of me like bait. I pulled my hand back, grabbed my bag, and told her I wasn't ready to forgive her. Maybe I never would be. Her eyes went wide, like she hadn't expected me to actually stand my ground. As I walked out, I realized something chilling. They didn't want forgiveness because they cared about me. They wanted forgiveness because it would make their lives easier. A week later, my mom insisted on a family dinner. She made it sound like some big peacekeeping effort, but I knew what it really was. A staged performance where I was supposed to smile, nod, and accept everything like the obedient daughter. When I walked into my parents' house, the scene made my skin crawl. Claire was in the kitchen with my mom, laughing like nothing had ever happened. Mark was sitting at the table, bouncing the baby on his knee, while my dad stood nearby looking proud. It was like they were all in on some sitcom episode, and I was the unwanted guest character. The moment I walked in, Claire gave me this hopeful smile, like we were already on the road to forgiveness. Mark said something about being glad I came. I didn't respond. I just sat down, forcing myself to eat while they passed the baby around, gushing over how perfect he was. For a while, I stayed quiet, letting the fake cheerfulness fill the air. But then my mom placed the baby in my arms without asking, smiling like she was sealing some unspoken deal. Everyone stared at me, waiting, and I'll admit it, the baby was beautiful. Tiny fingers, wide eyes, soft hair. For a split second I felt that pull, the kind that makes your chest ache. He was innocent. None of this was his fault. But as I held him, I also felt the crushing weight of what they were all trying to do. They weren't giving me a moment with my nephew out of love. They were using him to rope me back in. I handed him back to Claire and pushed my chair back. The room went silent. That's when I said it. I wasn't ready to play happy family. That just because they were comfortable with the lies didn't mean I had to be. I told them I wasn't going to babysit. I wasn't going to gloss over what happened, and I sure as hell wasn't going to be manipulated with a baby. The air shifted instantly. My mom gasped. My dad muttered something about me being ungrateful, and Claire's eyes welled up like I'd just slapped her. Mark, though, he exploded. He said I was selfish, that I was punishing him for falling in love, that I was trying to ruin the one good thing he had. The argument escalated fast, everyone talking over each other, voices rising, until I finally stood up and yelled that I was done. I wasn't going to be part of their charade. If they wanted to pretend everything was perfect, fine, but I wasn't going to sit at that table and choke down lies with my dinner. I grabbed my coat and stormed out, ignoring Claire's voice calling after me. By the time I reached my car, my hands were shaking, my throat raw. I'd always thought family was supposed to be the one place you could never be replaced, but walking away that night, I realized I'd already been replaced. By a secret marriage, by a baby, by a bond they decided I didn't deserve to be part of. After that dinner, I went no contact. No texts, no calls, no family visits. I muted the group chat and ignored every voicemail. At first, it felt impossible. I've never gone this long without talking to my mom, let alone my brother. But the silence was the only thing keeping me sane. Weeks passed. I started to feel lighter, like I could breathe without all that pressure. For the first time in months, I wasn't constantly being guilt-tripped into forgiveness. I went back to focusing on my own life, work, friends outside of family, even picking up old hobbies I'd abandoned. But of course, it didn't last. It was a Saturday morning when I got a call from an unknown number. Against my better judgment, I answered. It was Mark. His voice was frantic. He said Claire had to go out of town unexpectedly to help her sister, and he was stuck with the baby alone. He begged me to come over and help for just a few hours. I almost hung up on him, but then I heard the baby crying in the background, loud and panicked. Something in me twisted. I hated them both, but that little boy hadn't done anything to me. Against every instinct, I went. When I walked in, the place was chaos. Bottles half cleaned in the sink, laundry piled on the couch, Mark pacing with the baby screaming in his arms. He looked exhausted, desperate. For the first time, I saw my brother not as the smug, selfish man who betrayed me, but as someone in way over his head. He shoved the baby into my arms without even asking, muttering thanks before collapsing onto the couch. I held my nephew, rocking him until his cries softened. That ache came back, stronger this time. He clung to me like I was the only safe thing in the room. Hours passed. I fed him, changed him, got him to sleep. Mark barely said a word, just sat there with his head in his hands. Finally, he muttered that he was sorry. Sorry for everything. Sorry for the lies. Sorry for hurting me. His voice cracked, and for the first time I believed he actually meant it. But I didn't say I forgave him. I couldn't. As I left that evening, my nephew asleep in his crib, Mark asked if I'd consider helping out more often. His tone wasn't demanding this time. It was pleading. I drove home with my stomach in knots, because no matter how much I hated what they did to me, I couldn't deny it anymore. I loved that baby, and that made everything so much more complicated. I should have known it wouldn't stay between me and Mark. A couple of days later, Claire texted me out of nowhere. Thank you for helping out this weekend. It really means the world to us. The U.S. stung. I hadn't done it for her. I hadn't done it for Mark either. I'd done it because I couldn't stand to hear a baby screaming in the background while my brother was falling apart. But Claire didn't see it that way. The next message came a few hours later, this time longer. She wrote about how happy she was that I was finally coming around, and how she knew we'd find our way back to being like sisters again. She even added a line about how it was fate that her child would grow up with me as an aunt. Reading it, I realized exactly what she was doing. She was spinning my one act of compassion into some grand reconciliation, painting me as the one who'd made the first move toward forgiveness. And if she was telling me this, she was definitely telling my parents the same thing. Sure enough, the very next day, my mom called me. She was practically glowing through the phone, saying she'd heard about how I'd stepped up, how proud she was, how this was the fresh start our family needed. I almost dropped my phone. A fresh start? I hadn't forgiven anyone. I hadn't forgotten a damn thing. The more I thought about it, the more furious I became. Claire had taken the one vulnerable choice I'd made, for the sake of an innocent baby, and twisted it into proof that I was ready to play happy family again. That weekend, she invited me to a small brunch at their house. When I got there, I realized it wasn't small at all. My parents, some cousins, even family friends were there. And sure enough, Claire made a toast. She thanked everyone for supporting her and Mark, but then she turned to me, smiling sweetly, and said she was especially grateful to have her best friend and sister-in-law back in her life. One clapped. My mom teared up. Mark looked stunned but didn't correct her, and I just sat there, gripping my glass so hard I thought it might break, realizing I'd been cornered into their narrative. They wanted me to forgive. They wanted me to forget. And now, they were putting me on display, parading me around as proof that the past was behind us. But it wasn't. Not even close. I held my tongue for as long as I could during that brunch, but the more I listened, the more my blood boiled. Every conversation circled back to the baby this, the happy couple that, and every time someone glanced at me, it was with this smug satisfaction, like I'd finally gotten over my tantrum and fallen back in line. Then Claire, smiling that polished smile she always wore when she wanted to control the room, leaned over and told everyone how grateful she was that family always finds a way back together. She even squeezed my hand, like we were best friends again. That was it. I set my glass down, stood up, and told the whole room the truth, that I hadn't forgiven them, that I wasn't back, that Claire and Mark had lied to me for over a year, got married behind my back, had a baby, and then let everyone else in the family know, except me. I told them how humiliated I felt scrolling through Instagram and finding out about my nephew from strangers, congratulating them online. The room went dead silent. My mom's fork clattered against her plate. A cousin shifted uncomfortably. Claire's face went pale, but she tried to recover, saying softly that love doesn't follow rules, and that she and Mark had only been trying to protect me. Protect me? I laughed. I told everyone how she used me as a sounding board for years while secretly dating my brother, how she asked my mom not to tell me, how the entire family decided my feelings didn't matter. Mark finally spoke up, his voice sharp, saying I was making a scene, embarrassing them in front of everyone, and maybe I was. But I didn't care. I told him he didn't get to decide how I processed betrayal, that Claire didn't get to stand there painting herself as some saint for bringing the family together when she was the one who blew it apart. The tension was unbearable. My dad muttered something about airing dirty laundry. My mom begged me to sit down, but I refused. I grabbed my bag, told everyone I was done being their scapegoat, and walked out. As I drove home, my phone lit up with notifications, missed calls, angry texts from Mark, pleading ones from my mom, and one long message from Claire accusing me of trying to ruin her reputation. But for the first time in months, I felt something I hadn't felt since this nightmare started. Relief, because I'd finally said out loud what they all wanted me to swallow. The days after that brunch were chaos. My phone was blowing up nonstop, Mark accusing me of being jealous, my mom insisting I'd gone too far, and Claire sending paragraph after paragraph about how I'd humiliated her in front of her new family. Not once did she call it our family. That slip said it all. I ignored most of it, but one night I opened a message from Claire. It was long, emotional, and manipulative. She wrote that if I truly loved her like a sister, I'd find a way to forgive her. She said the baby needed me, that one day he'd ask why his aunt wasn't around, and she didn't want to have to paint me as the bitter one. That line burned. The bitter one. She was already preparing to rewrite the story, to make me the villain in her perfect little narrative. So I made a decision. I wrote one final message back. I told her and Mark that I wasn't going to be part of their game anymore, that I loved that baby deeply, but I refused to be manipulated into pretending everything was fine. I told them if they wanted me in his life, it would have to be on honest terms, not lies, not staged brunches, not family interventions. And then I muted them both. When I told my parents, they begged me to reconsider. My mom cried, saying families shouldn't fall apart like this. My dad just shook his head, disappointed, but I held my ground. For once, I wasn't bending to keep the peace. Weeks passed. The silence from Mark and Claire was deafening at first, but slowly I started to feel free. I reconnected with old friends, started traveling on weekends, even tried dating again. My life wasn't revolving around their betrayal anymore. And then, last week, something happened. I got a picture in the mail. No return address. It was of my nephew, smiling, his tiny fist clutching a stuffed animal. On the back, written in Claire's handwriting, were 3 words: "He'll need you." I stared at it for a long time. My chest ached. I put the photo in a drawer. Because here's the truth. Maybe one day, when he's older, when he can understand, I'll explain why I wasn't there. Maybe I'll have a relationship with him separate from them. But for now, I'm done sacrificing myself for people who had no problem erasing me from their lives. My brother chose his wife. My best friend chose her secret. And I'm finally choosing me.